You need to come outside right now, or we're coming in whether you like it or not." On what should have been a quiet evening, 10 police officers would surround a single black woman's home, treating her like a criminal, completely unaware that the woman they were intimidating was a powerful civil rights attorney who would sue every one of them for $5 million the very next day. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The neighborhood had settled into its usual rhythm of calm. Porch lights flickered on one by one, casting warm pools of light across neatly trimmed lawns. The distant hum of a passing car faded quickly, leaving behind a quiet stillness that felt almost untouched. Inside a modest home at the end of the street, Monica Ellis moved slowly through her kitchen. The soft clink of utensils against a pan, the steady rhythm of something simmering on the stove, it was the kind of peaceful routine that marked the end of a long day. She did not rush. She never rushed. Her movements were measured, deliberate, her posture relaxed but grounded. There was a quiet control in everything she did, a sense of awareness that did not need to announce itself. A small radio played softly in the background, the voice of a late-night host blending into the calm atmosphere. Monica reached for a glass, filling it halfway with water, her attention steady, her breathing even. Outside, the first flash of red and blue broke through the stillness. It came faint at first, reflecting off the edge of a parked car. Then stronger, brighter. The distant sound of sirens followed. Low, growing, approaching with intent. Monica paused, not startled, not alarmed, just aware. She set the glass down carefully, her eyes shifting slightly toward the front of the house as the light flickered across her walls. The rhythm of the evening had changed. Tires rolled into the street, one after another, until the quiet neighborhood was filled with the presence of authority. Doors opened. Boots stepped on a pavement. Radios crackled. Voices murmured with urgency that did not match the calm surroundings. One patrol car became 2, then 4, then more. By the time the movement stopped, the street was no longer quiet. It was occupied. 10 officers spread across the front of her home, their positions deliberate, their presence overwhelming. Neighbors began to peek through curtains, confusion turning into concern as the scale of the scene became clear. And at the center of it all, Sergeant Brian Calloway stepped forward, his posture rigid, his expression already set, already convinced. Inside, Monica moved toward the front door, her steps steady, her presence unchanged. The pounding came suddenly, sharp, aggressive, echoing through the house. "Police! Open the door!" The command cut through the calm like something violent. Monica reached the door, her hand resting briefly on the handle. Just for a moment. Not hesitation. Calculation. Then, slowly, she turned it open. And standing there, framed by flashing lights and overwhelming force, Monica Ellis looked exactly as she had before. Calm, composed, and completely unshaken. But the peace around her had already been broken. The door stood open, and the night air pressed in against the threshold, carrying with it the weight of flashing lights and silent judgment. Sergeant Brian Calloway did not step back. He stepped forward, step outside. He ordered immediately, his voice loud, sharp, designed to control the moment before it could take shape on its own. Monica did not move right away. She stood in the doorway, one hand still resting lightly against the frame, her posture steady, her expression calm. "Is there a reason you are on my property?" she asked, her tone even, measured, untouched by the aggression in front of her. Calloway's jaw tightened slightly. He was not used to being questioned, not like this, not without hesitation. "You can ask questions after you step outside," he snapped, gesturing sharply toward the yard. Behind him, officers were already spreading out, their boots pressing into her lawn, flashlights sweeping across windows, scanning without permission. The scene was no longer contained. It was expanding. Monica's eyes moved briefly past him, taking in the positions, the numbers, the unnecessary scale of the presence. 10 officers, for one woman. She stepped forward then, slowly, deliberately, closing the door behind her with a soft click that felt almost out of place against the tension. She stood on the porch now, framed by flashing red and blue light, her silhouette steady against the overwhelming force in front of her. "I am outside," she said calmly. Calloway exhaled sharply, stepping closer, invading her space without hesitation. "We received a report that a suspect matching a description was seen entering this residence," he said, his tone clipped, authoritative. "We're going to search the premises." Monica tilted her head slightly, not confused, just acknowledging. "Do you have a warrant?" she asked. The question landed harder than anything else. For a fraction of a second, Calloway did not respond. Then his expression hardened, his posture stiffening as he leaned further into authority. "We have probable cause," he said. "That is enough." Monica held his gaze, steady, unflinching. "No," she replied quietly. "It is not." The words were not loud, but they carried. A murmur moved faintly through the watching neighbors. Mrs. Dorothy Lane had stepped closer to the edge of her lawn, her arms folded tightly as she watched the exchange unfold. Phones were no longer hidden now. They were raised, recording. Calloway's irritation sharpened visibly. "Listen," he said, his voice rising. "You do not get to tell me what is enough. We are conducting an investigation." He gestured toward the house. "And if you do not cooperate, this gets a lot harder for you." Monica's posture did not change. Her breathing remained steady. "I am cooperating," she said. "I'm asking you to follow the law." Calloway stepped even closer, his voice dropping into something more personal, more forceful. "You think standing there and talking like that makes you untouchable?" he asked. Monica met his gaze. Calm, precise. "No," she said. "It means I understand exactly what you are doing." The silence that followed stretched just long enough to be felt. And then, without warning, Calloway turned sharply, raising his voice. "Harris, move in." The command cut through the night. Officers shifted instantly, boots stepping toward the door, toward the threshold that separated lawful presence from intrusion. And standing there, on her own porch, surrounded by flashing lights and rising tension, Monica Ellis did not raise her voice, did not step back, did not break her calm. But the moment had already crossed into something that could not be undone. The command landed, and the line disappeared. Officer Harris did not hesitate. He moved past Calloway and up the steps, his boots striking the wood of the porch with heavy, deliberate force. Another officer followed close behind, then another, their movements coordinated, practiced, unquestioning. The door that had just closed moments ago was no longer a boundary. It was an obstacle. Harris reached for the handle first, testing it quickly, then pushing it open without pause. The sound of the door swinging inward echoed into the house, sharp, intrusive, final. Inside, the calm that had once defined the space fractured instantly. Footsteps crossed the threshold. Voices followed. "Clear the front. Check the back rooms. Move." The commands overlapped, filling the house with urgency that did not belong there. Outside, Monica remained on the porch, her posture unchanged, her hands relaxed at her sides, her gaze steady as she watched strangers enter her home. She did not move to stop them. She did not raise her voice. She simply observed. Calloway stood just a few feet from her, his chest rising and falling with controlled breath, his presence still loud, still forceful, but no longer unquestioned. "If there is nothing inside," he said, his tone sharp, "then this will be over quickly." Monica's eyes remained on him, calm, unshaken. "You have already made it something else," she replied quietly. The words landed, but Calloway dismissed them with a quick turn of his head, his attention shifting back toward the open doorway where his officers moved through her space. Inside, drawers opened. Cabinets shifted. The sound of movement replaced the quiet rhythm that had existed only minutes before. A chair scraped lightly against the floor. A door closed, then opened again. The house was no longer hers in that moment. It was being taken apart, piece by piece, under the assumption that something must be found. Across the street, Mrs. Dorothy Lane stepped further out onto her lawn, her posture stiff, her eyes fixed on the scene. A younger man stood beside her now, his phone held steady, capturing everything without interruption. The neighborhood had become a witness. Calloway paced once across the porch, then turned back toward Monica, his hands resting firmly on his belt. "You understand why we are here," he said. It was not a question. Monica met his gaze. "No," she said. "I understand what you are doing." The distinction hung in the air. Calloway's jaw tightened slightly. "Same thing," he replied. But it was not. Inside the house, one of the officers called out, "Nothing in the front." Another voice followed from deeper inside. "Kitchen is clear." The words should have slowed the moment. They should have. Instead, Calloway leaned further into it. "Keep checking," he called out. "Do not miss anything." The insistence revealed something now. This was no longer about finding something. It was about justifying what had already been done. Monica remained still, her breathing steady, her eyes moving once more toward the open doorway, taking in every detail, the movement, the voices, the absence of reason behind it all. "You are documenting this," she said quietly. Calloway glanced back at her. "Of course," he replied. "We document everything." Monica held his gaze for a moment longer. "Good," she said. The single word carried weight. Not defiance, not emotion, just certainty. And standing there, on her own porch, with her home already breached and the search yielding nothing, Monica Ellis remained exactly as she had been from the beginning. Calm, composed, and fully aware that the moment unfolding in front of her was not ending. It was building. The word building settled into the night like a quiet inevitability, but Sergeant Calloway refused to recognize it. Instead, he leaned further into the moment, his posture stiffening as if authority alone could justify what was already unraveling. "Keep moving," he called toward the house, his voice sharper now, more forceful, pushing his officers deeper into a search that had already yielded nothing. Inside, the sounds intensified, not because there was anything left to find, but because stopping would mean acknowledging the truth. Drawers opened harder. Footsteps moved faster. Doors were checked again, not out of necessity, but out of refusal to concede. Monica stood still, her gaze following the movement inside, her expression unchanged, her breathing steady. There was no urgency in her stance, no attempt to intervene, just observation. And that stillness began to weigh on the scene more than any resistance could have. Calloway turned back toward her, his irritation now more visible, more exposed. "You see how this works?" he said, gesturing toward the house. "We verify. We make sure." Monica's eyes returned to him, calm, precise. "You are not verifying anything," she replied. "You are justifying what you already decided." The distinction landed, and for a brief moment, Calloway's expression faltered, not enough to break, but enough to reveal the crack beneath the surface. He recovered quickly, his jaw tightening. "You think standing there and talking like that changes anything?" he asked. Monica did not raise her voice. "No," she said, "but it makes it very clear." The words lingered, and this time they did not fade. They settled. Inside the house, another voice called out louder now. "Nothing here, Sergeant." The statement echoed through the open doorway, carrying across the porch, across the lawn, across the watching neighbors. It should have ended the search. It should have. But Calloway did not respond immediately. He stood there, his posture rigid, his authority now pressed against the absence of evidence. "Check again," he said finally, his voice lower but more forceful. "Do not miss anything." The insistence no longer sounded procedural. It sounded defensive. Monica watched him, her expression unchanged, but something beneath it sharpened, quiet, precise, unmistakable. "You are extending this," she said. Calloway turned toward her again, irritation flashing. "I am finishing it," he replied. Monica held his gaze. "No," she said. "You are making it worse." The words landed heavier this time, not because they were louder, but because they were undeniable. The house behind them had already been cleared. The officers knew it. The neighbors knew it. And now, even Calloway could feel it pressing in. Still, he did not step back. He did not call it off. Instead, He took a step closer to Monica, his voice dropping into something more personal, more controlled. "You really think you understand what is happening here?" he asked. Monica's answer came without hesitation. "Yes," she said. A pause followed, long enough to be felt. Then she added, "And so will you." The certainty in her voice did not rise. It settled. Final. Calloway held her gaze for a moment longer, then let out a short breath, shaking his head as if dismissing something insignificant. "We will see," he said. But the words lacked conviction. They fell flat against the weight of the moment. And standing there, on a porch that was no longer just a boundary, but a line already crossed, Monica Ellis remained calm, composed, and completely in control of something Calloway could not yet see. Because the search was not building toward a discovery. It was building toward consequence. The word consequence settled into the night with a weight that no one could ignore, even if only one person fully understood it. Calloway shifted his stance, his boots pressing harder into the porch as if grounding himself against something invisible pushing back. His authority, once loud and unquestioned, now felt strained, stretched across a moment that refused to resolve in his favor. Inside the house, the sounds had slowed. Not because anything had been found, but because there was nothing left to search. One officer stepped into the doorway, his posture hesitant. "Sergeant, we have checked everything," he said. "There is nothing here." The statement hung in the air, clear, final, unavoidable. It should have ended everything. But Calloway did not move. He did not turn fully toward the officer. Instead, he kept his eyes on Monica, as if the absence of evidence could be forced into something else if he held the moment long enough. "Then you check again," he said, his voice lower now, tighter. The command lacked the certainty it once carried. It sounded less like authority and more like refusal. Monica watched him, her expression unchanged, her presence steady, grounded. "You already know what you're going to find," she said quietly. Calloway's jaw tightened. "I will decide that," he replied. But even he could hear it now, the difference in his own voice. The hesitation, the strain. Behind him, the officer in the doorway did not move. He glanced briefly at the others inside, then back at Calloway, uncertainty replacing the earlier obedience. The shift had begun, and it was visible. Calloway exhaled sharply, turning away from Monica for the first time, stepping off the porch and onto the lawn. He paced once, then back again, his hands resting firmly on his belt as if trying to reclaim something slipping through his fingers. The flashing lights continued to cut across the scene, but they no longer framed control. They exposed it. "We will verify everything before we leave," he said, louder now, addressing both his team and the watching neighbors. The statement sounded official, but hollow. Monica stepped forward just slightly, enough to shift the space between them again. "You have already verified it," she said. Calloway turned back toward her, irritation flashing once more, but weaker now. "You do not get to tell me when this ends," he said. Monica's gaze remained steady. "No," she replied, "but you are deciding how it ends." The distinction settled heavily. Inside the house, the officers had stopped moving. The search was over. The only thing continuing now was Calloway. His insistence, his refusal, his need to justify what had already crossed into something irreversible. He stepped closer again, stopping just a few feet from Monica, his voice dropping into something more controlled, more personal. "You think this goes somewhere?" he asked. Monica held his gaze. "I know it does," she said. A pause followed, longer than the others. Heavier. Then she added, "You should reconsider what you are doing." The words were not loud, but they carried a finality that could not be ignored. Calloway stared at her for a moment, then let out a short, dismissive laugh, shaking his head. "No," he said, "I think I am exactly where I need to be." And with that, he turned away again, calling out to his team, pushing forward as if nothing had changed. But everything had, and the moment he chose to continue was the moment he lost the last chance to stop. The laughter lingered for a moment after Calloway turned away, thin and hollow, echoing just enough to fill the silence he refused to acknowledge. But the air had changed. It was no longer tense in the same way. It was settled, heavy, still inevitable. Calloway reached for his radio, pulling it from his shoulder with a sharp motion, his movements quick, deliberate, as if finishing the process would restore the authority he had already lost. "Dispatch," he said, his voice louder now, forcing control back into the moment. "Negative on suspect. Scene secure. We are clearing out." The words sounded official, final, but they did not land with the same weight they once would have. Inside the house, officers began to step back, their movements slower now, quieter, their earlier urgency replaced by something closer to discomfort. One by one, they exited the doorway, their presence no longer overwhelming, just visible. Monica remained where she stood, her posture unchanged, her gaze steady as she watched the shift unfold. She did not move to follow. She did not speak immediately. She allowed the moment to settle completely. Then, quietly, she stepped forward. Just one step, enough to bring her voice back into the space. "Sergeant Calloway," she said. He paused. Not fully. Just enough. His hand still holding the radio, his back partially turned, his posture caught between leaving and responding. "What?" he asked, impatience sharp in the word. Monica's voice remained calm, measured, but there was something beneath it now. Something colder, more precise. "You just authorized an unlawful search of a private residence," she said. The words were not loud, but they carried. Calloway let out a short breath, shaking his head as if dismissing something trivial. "We had probable cause," he replied quickly. Monica's gaze did not shift. "No," she said. "You claimed it." The distinction landed harder than he expected. He turned slightly now, his expression tightening, irritation rising again. "You really think that matters?" he asked. Monica held his gaze. "I know it does," she replied. A pause followed. Then she added, "Because everything you just did is now evidence." The words settled into the space, heavier than anything else that had been said. Calloway's grip on the radio tightened slightly. "You are not in a position to tell me what is evidence," he said, his voice sharper now, defensive beneath the surface. Monica took another step forward. Slow, controlled. "You are wrong," she said. "I am exactly in that position." The silence that followed was different. Not tense, not uncertain, defined. Calloway stared at her for a moment, then let out a short, dismissive laugh, shaking his head again. "You really believe that?" he asked. Monica did not hesitate. "I do not believe it," she said. "I practice it." The words landed, but he refused to let them settle. "Yeah," he muttered, turning away again, waving a hand as if brushing the moment aside. "You could tell that story to someone else." He clipped the radio back into place, stepping off the porch, signaling his team to move. "We're done here," he called out. Officers began to disperse, their movements quiet, controlled, their presence already retreating from the space they had overtaken. And just like that, with a final dismissal and a careless turn, Sergeant Brian Calloway walked away from the last warning he would ever be given, completely unaware that the moment he believed he had closed had only just begun. The night had already begun to settle back into itself when it happened. At first, it was distant, barely noticeable beneath the fading hum of engines pulling away. Then it grew, low, controlled, unmistakable. Tires, multiple vehicles, moving with precision. Calloway had just reached the edge of the lawn when he slowed, his steps faltering almost imperceptibly. His head turned toward the street. The formation was wrong. Too organized, too deliberate. Black SUVs rolled into view, one after another, their movements synchronized, their presence cutting through the neighborhood with quiet authority. They did not rush. They arrived. Doors opened in near unison. Figures stepped out, sharp, composed, controlled. No wasted motion, no raised voices, just presence. Real presence. Calloway's posture shifted, not dramatically, but enough. His shoulders tightened. His hand moved instinctively toward his belt, not out of control, but out of habit. "What is this?" he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Behind him, the remaining officers paused, their movements slowing as the scene they thought was ending began to change. Monica did not move. She did not turn immediately. She simply stood there, her posture steady, her presence unchanged, as if this moment had always been part of what came next. From the lead vehicle, a man stepped forward, his stride measured, his gaze scanning once, quick, precise, taking in the porch, the officers, the open door, the witnesses still standing nearby. Then his eyes found Monica, and in that instant, everything aligned. "Ms. Ellis," he said, his voice calm, controlled, carrying authority without effort. Calloway froze. The name landed differently this time. Not from her, from someone else. Someone who did not question it, who did not test it, who recognized it. Monica turned then, slowly, her expression unchanged. "Good evening, James," she said. The familiarity settled into the space like something definitive. Calloway's breathing shifted, slightly. His eyes moved between them, confusion tightening into something sharper, something closer to realization, but not fully formed. Not yet. The man, Attorney James Holloway, stepped closer, his presence firm, unshaken. Behind him, others followed, carrying folders, devices, documentation already prepared. "We have everything," James said, his tone even. "Timestamps, footage, witness statements." The words were not loud, but they carried weight. Calloway's hand dropped from his belt, just slightly. "Enough. What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice thinner now, stripped of the certainty it once held. James did not look at him immediately. His focus remained on Monica for a brief moment longer, then shifted. "I'm talking about the unlawful entry you just authorized," he said. "The violation of private property, the intimidation, the misuse of force begins." The silence that followed was absolute. Calloway stood there, surrounded by the same space he had controlled minutes ago, but it no longer belonged to him. And for the first time that night, he understood something he had never considered. He was no longer the authority in this situation. He was the subject of it. The silence that followed Monica's final words did not break. It settled, heavy and absolute, pressing into every corner of the street until even the night itself seemed to hold its breath. Sergeant Brian Calloway stood motionless, his posture no longer rigid with authority, but suspended, caught between denial and realization. His eyes moved slowly, taking in the figures now surrounding him, the folders in their hands, the quiet certainty in their stance. None of it was loud. None of it needed to be. James Holloway stepped forward, his presence calm but immovable, extending a document toward Calloway. "You and your officers are being formally named in a civil rights violation case," he said, his tone even precise. "Effective immediately." Calloway did not reach for it at first. His hands remained at his sides, his fingers tightening slightly, as if resisting something internal, something he could no longer control. That is not how this works," he said, but the words came out thinner than he intended, stripped of the authority they once carried. James did not react. "This is exactly how it works," he replied. "Everything you did tonight has already been documented. Every action, every order, every entry into that home." The words landed one by one, not as accusations, but as facts. Around them, the officers who had once moved with confidence now stood still, their earlier certainty replaced by quiet awareness. Officer Harris shifted slightly, his gaze dropping, his posture no longer aligned with Calloway's. The unity that had defined their presence had dissolved. Calloway finally reached for the document, his hand slower than it had ever been, the movement uncertain. The paper felt heavier than it should have. $5 million. The number stared back at him, unyielding. His grip tightened, then loosened, as if even holding it required more control than he had left. "You had multiple opportunities to stop," Monica said quietly. He looked up then, meeting her gaze, but this time there was no challenge in his eyes. No dominance, only the weight of understanding settling in. I was doing my job," he said, but the sentence fractured as it left him. Monica's expression did not change. "Your job does not remove responsibility," she replied. The words were not sharp. They did not need to be. They settled into him, deeper than anything louder could have reached. Behind him, One of the suited officials stepped forward, his tone calm but firm. "Sergeant Calloway, we will need you to remain here. Your department has been notified." The instruction was simple, final. Calloway nodded faintly, the movement barely visible, his shoulders lowering as the last trace of his authority slipped away. He stepped back, just one step, but it was enough. Enough to mark the shift completely. The man who had stood at the center of control now stood at its edge, removed from it entirely. Around him, the scene no longer belonged to him. It belonged to process, to consequence, to something far beyond the moment he had tried to dominate. Monica remained where she stood, her posture unchanged, her presence steady, her gaze calm. She did not step forward. She did not need to. Justice had already moved into place. And standing there, under the same flashing lights that had once framed his authority, Brian Calloway understood something with absolute clarity. The moment he thought he controlled had been the moment he lost everything. The weight of realization lingered in the air long after the words had been spoken. The street, once flooded with noise and authority, began to return to its natural rhythm, but not the same rhythm it had before. Something had shifted. Something had settled. The flashing lights that had once dominated the scene now felt distant, their reflections softer, less intrusive against the quiet homes that lined the street. Officers moved with slower steps now, their earlier urgency replaced by quiet compliance, their presence no longer overwhelming, but controlled, measured, almost careful. Sergeant Brian Calloway stood where he had been left, the document still in his hand, his posture no longer commanding, his presence no longer central. No one looked to him anymore. No one waited for his voice. The authority he had carried into the night had not just been challenged. It had been removed. Monica Ellis remained on her porch, her posture unchanged, her presence steady, grounded in the same calm certainty she had carried from the beginning. She did not step forward. She did not speak again. There was nothing left to say. James Holloway closed his folder with a quiet, deliberate motion, the sound precise, controlled. "We will take it from here," he said softly. Monica gave a small nod, her expression composed, her focus already shifting beyond the moment. Across the street, Mrs. Dorothy Lane lowered her hand slowly, her shoulders relaxing as the tension that had gripped the neighborhood finally released. The crowd began to disperse, not quickly, not abruptly, but with quiet understanding, as if everyone recognized that what they had witnessed did not need commentary. It needed reflection. One by one, the vehicles pulled away, their engines fading into the distance, their presence no longer necessary. The street grew quieter with each passing second, the disruption dissolving into memory. Monica turned then, her movement calm, deliberate, stepping back toward her front door. She paused briefly at the threshold, her hand resting lightly against the frame, as if acknowledging the space that had been violated and now restored. Then she stepped inside. The door closed softly behind her, sealing the moment, returning the house to its original stillness. Inside, the quiet resumed, the same quiet that had existed before, but deeper now, steadier, informed by what had passed. Outside, the neighborhood returned to itself. Porch lights glowed. The wind moved gently through the trees. And the street, once overtaken by force, now carried something different, balance. Not loud, not dramatic, but complete. Because what had been broken had not been ignored. It had been answered. And in that answer, there was peace. What makes this story resonate is not the scale of the confrontation, but the quiet imbalance that existed from the very beginning. Sergeant Calloway believed that control came from numbers, from presence, from the ability to overwhelm a situation before it could push back. But what he failed to recognize is that true authority does not need to arrive loudly, and it does not rely on force to sustain itself. Monica Ellis never raised her voice, never resisted in a way that invited escalation, because she understood something deeper about power. She understood that when systems are misused, the most effective response is not immediate resistance, but precise accountability. What unfolded was not just a reversal, but a demonstration of how quickly confidence collapses when it is built on assumption rather than structure. The moment Calloway crossed the threshold, he was no longer in control of the outcome, even though he believed he was shaping it. And that is what lingers. Not the confrontation itself, but the realization that power, when separated from responsibility, becomes fragile in ways that are not immediately visible. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please share with your friends and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.